ESPN's Eric Karabell with Armen and Levack on 104.5 The Team, hosts of Fantasy Focus Sunday mornings 9 a.m. right here on 104.5 The Team, ESPN Radio. And Eric, we are fans of Dion Lewis, the Albany native, the Patriots running back. He is owned in less than 50% of ESPN leagues. Should more people be owning Dion Lewis?
More people should definitely be owning Dion Lewis, but I would call him a bit of a sell-high guy. I don't expect him to play quite at this level for the duration of the season because I think the Patriots every week are going to change their game plan depending on the defense, and LeGarrette Blount ought to get at least 15 rushing attempts this week, whereas last week he didn't. So Lewis will be used more as like the Shane Vereen type receiver, but I don't expect a lot of rushing attempts this week.
Eric, when you look over at that Cowboys roster, Romo down, Dez down, now we're hearing that Witten's a little banged up. Is there any Cowboy player that you should own in fantasy football?
Well, yeah, I mean, you should still own Dez Bryant. He'll be back eventually, and their running back, Joseph Randle, is still pretty good. And I think their offensive line is so good, and the matchups are still pretty nice the next couple of weeks, that I think they're going to be able to run the football even with Brandon Weeden at quarterback. So I value Joseph Randle as a top 20 running back. I'd own him. I think Terrence Williams is still worth owning, though he's not as attractive as he was with Romo. And if Witten plays, they'll throw to him.
Eric Karabell, ESPN fantasy guru of ESPN.com, at Karabell ESPN on Twitter. Eric, staying in the NFC East, our New York Giants last night win that game. Obviously, OBJ is a given. Who else on that Giants roster do you really like on fantasy teams?
Well, I mean, I think Eli Manning is a top 10 quarterback borderline. I mean, not a guy you have to use every week, but if the matchups are right, and it was right against Washington, then you would be using him. And Rashad Jennings, I mean, I'm shocked that he's playing on punt teams, and he blocked a punt, which is awesome. But, you know, he's a borderline top 20 running back, is a guy you certainly should be considering as a flex option. Only 32 rushing yards last night, which is disappointing. And Andre Williams got a lot of love, too, and got the touchdown. But I think Jennings is okay. Ruben Randle, could he be a top 50 wide receiver? I don't expect Victor Cruz back anytime soon. So I think Randle has the opportunity in a deeper league.
Now, also, we've got the New York Jets right here on this station. They're going to face the Eagles. The Eagles not very productive so far. Do you expect a fantasy outbreak from anybody on that team this week?
No, not this week. They've looked awful. I'm telling. Well, I mean, the Jets, they're running into the worst defense at the worst time. I mean, like, the Jets are going to just destroy the run game. So even if DeMarco Murray plays, I don't think he's a very good option. Sam Bradford does not look good. The Eagles' offensive line has not been able to block or open up any holes. So I think the Jets are going to have a field day here. It's one of the top defenses in fantasy. I will say that Jordan Matthews is still worth owning and relying on. You have to own DeMarco Murray. They should figure this out eventually, and they still play a lot of bad defenses in their division. But, yeah, this week against the Jets defense is looking pretty good.
So despite DeMarco Murray's injury history, you're still high on him in fantasy?
Well, high is a relative term. I mean, I think we saw last season what he can do when you open up holes for him.
Yeah.
And I think Philly's offense will provide that once they figure out what is wrong, whether it's timing or mechanics or their guard play. I don't expect him to be a top 10 running back like last year when he was number one. I think he can be valuable. I mean, there's not enough running backs to go around right now. I can't find 20 for my top 20. Let's be that clear. But I do think that Murray will improve as the season goes on. But, I mean, obviously, if you drafted him in the first round, you're not happy.
Co-host of Fantasy Focus, heard Sunday mornings 9 a.m. right here on 104.5 The Team, ESPN Radio. Fantasy football writer Eric Karabell with Armen and Levack, fantasy writer all around. All right, so what other players have some great value that are still out there on the waiver wires that you really like, Eric?
Well, I mean, in general, it's going to be flex options that are playing running back or wide receiver. We never really talk about quarterbacks in that way because there's way too many of them as it is. I mean, Dion Lewis is still available in a lot of leagues. James Starks of the Packers this weekend, they're on Monday Night Football. I don't expect Eddie Lacy to play in that game, so he's a guy you want to add right now pretty much. Todd Gurley, if he's still available in any of your leagues, I think he'll play for the Rams this weekend, but even if he doesn't, his future looks very bright. Arian Foster's probably not playing for Houston this weekend. Chris Polk has passed Alfred Blue as the number one running back on that team. And eventually C.J. Spiller should matter for the Saints.
Eric, is there anywhere you can go that a guy like myself doesn't walk up and go, man, I got Tony Romo, what do I do?
Church.
Is that the only place?
Amen.
I would hit you up.
Look, everybody's talking fantasy no matter where you go these days, whether it's daily or traditional. A lot of people have Tony Romo. They're not too pleased. If you want to drop him because he's out for 2 months, it makes perfect sense to me. There's plenty of quarterbacks to add that are available in a lot of leagues. There are cars out there, for example. So even if you had Romo, your season is not even remotely over. If you drafted, say, DeMarco Murray or C.J. Anderson in first round, then it's going to be a little bit tougher. But anybody who loses a quarterback, there's tons of quarterbacks. Tyrod Taylor's still out there in half of ESPN's leagues from Buffalo. So you have no choice but to find another quarterback. It's a little bit harder at running back.
So what you're telling me personally, seeing as how I lost Romo in 2 leagues and put Carr in his place, I did okay.
Yeah, I mean, under the circumstances, I did think you did prime. It's not that big a deal losing a quarterback. Romo has been a top 10 guy for years, but he's never really been a top 3 guy ever.
Eric Karabell, ESPN.com senior writer. Eric, you've been writing a lot about baseball with the playoffs heating up. What jumps out to you? What do we need to know?
Well, I mean, starting pitching for the final week of the regular season is going to be all over the place. We saw Clayton Kershaw yesterday for the Dodgers. He only went 5 innings. That's going to be the norm in the final week of the season. So if you need to make up points on pitching, you're probably not going to be doing it with guys like Matt Harvey, Johnny Cueto, and Kershaw. They're just not going to pitch enough innings. So you're looking for relief pitchers, especially ones that can get some saves. Wade Davis of the Royals will be getting some saves. Closers still get used in the final week. Starting pitchers only get half used.
Senior fantasy writer at ESPN, Eric Karabell with Armen and Levack. Listen to Fantasy Focus, 9 a.m. this Sunday right here on ESPN Radio. Eric, enjoy the football weekend and the MLB playoffs. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, guys. Anytime.